Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talk. This is Aadi. This Sunday afternoon, we are asking a question. The biggest challenge of Pakistan may be the challenge of the region as well. What is the reason for me to say that? We will discuss this because there is a rising terror threat from the region. The AFPAC region has always been known for a lot of terrorist activities. As a matter of fact, the 9/11 events and many other events around the world have come out from here. If there is something that actually happens in this region, it's going to impact everyone across the world. To discuss this, I have with me, as you can see, Lieutenant General Syed Hasnain, who's come well prepared with all bullets in the chamber. Let me say that. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Jai Hind, to all our viewers. Yes, this is a very, very serious subject to discuss because it is being lost sight of. With so much happening around the world in other areas, on our borders, internally in India, this is an area which is escaping attention because most of these incidents which are taking place in Pakistan are small scale incidents, but they add up too much. And that's the reason why I think both of us agreed that we need to do a program of this kind.
Sir, the threat, of course, is real. It's just scary when you actually think about the kind of ammunition and arms that have been left behind by the Americans and the kind of attacks that are taking place in Pakistan. Of course, everything currently, and as per I'm going to just look at it from the mythological aspect, is across the Indus still. So in India, we've got this innate sense कि जब तक वो Indus नहीं cross करेगा तो हमको कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. And that is the battle of Panipat syndrome, as we all call it. I think we need to break that shell, and I hope this particular discussion allows a certain thought process to begin. Let me start with the first question, sir. I mean, we used to have these terrorist attacks quite a bit. Now we have them in limited scope, in limited areas. You've got attacks happening in Afghanistan, a lot in Pakistan. Of course, Pakistan has grown up in terms of the attacks, number of attacks in comparison to Afghanistan. We've had certain incidents in Syria and in the West Asian area. Having said that, one odd incident in India as well, the Mangalore blast and this and that. But there's been no major event. I mean, it's not that world-changing, globe-changing event has not kind of taken place. Is this now a restriction to terrorism being a regional phenomenon, or have people slept off, or what is happening here?
See, Aadi, the global cycle, so to say, of terror. The best way of looking at it is to examine the last 30 years. And the phase just before that, perhaps 10 years before that, when the build-up really started taking place. I don't count the period of the 60s as any serious terrorist threats because George Habash, Yasser Arafat, etc. were carrying out certain acts, but it is debatable whether they were really terrorist acts or not. Terrorism came into its fore in the 80s. We suffered in Punjab to a great extent. And from 89 onwards, we were one of the first nations in the world to suffer the consequences of transnational terror. That is the important thing. It's not just national elements, it is a transnational terror. Pakistan was the sponsor there. And we saw a lot of activity in the 90s taking place in the Middle East, the Al Qaeda coming into being subsequently in the early part of the millennium, different groups in Iraq, and then by 2014, the Islamic State. 2018, it seems, with the defeat of the ISIS in Syria, northern Iraq, its eviction from Philippines, in a place called Marawi, where it was fighting out against the Philippines army, it found itself displaced everywhere. The Al Qaeda had weakened already as a result of the American presence in Afghanistan. The ISIS was forced on the back foot. And we find that 2018 onwards, except for Afghanistan, the larger picture of terror seems to have receded from the world and become more regional, as you very correctly surmise. Central Asia, Southeast Asia, the Middle East. South Asia seems to be the only area where more transnational activities seems to have carried on and seems to be carrying on even now. This cycle is bound to come back. The reason why I say the cycle is bound to come back is because ideologically nothing has been addressed. You see, I remember going to the American State Department for a briefing many years ago, and they spoke about the long war, the war against radical ideology, radical Islam at that time. And how long would that war? They assessed was 100 years or more. The transformation of Islam would take place. And it's in 15 years since then, or 20 years since then, I find that the picture has improved to a great extent. The long war seemed to have curbed itself in 20 years, but that isn't really true, because the ideologies are very much existent, and that is what worries us. And with what is happening in Pakistan, what is happening in Afghanistan at the moment, there seems to be the first signs of resurgence coming. This is what we need to be careful of. This is what we need to study. This is what internationally all players have to be careful about.
I mean, the before I go to the next questions, I want to understand, why do you say there is a cycle? Now, is this because you can defeat the person, but you cannot defeat the mindset and the ideology? Is it because that there is always these hidden cells that are there who are kind of perpetuating this particular thing? Or is it because that this particular syndrome has metamorphosized into so many different places that it is not a concentric area that you need to focus on? It's like the entire world, with what we are seeing in Europe today, with incidents and this and that. What is it?
See, in this last cycle of global terror, I think the networks, international networks, didn't come to the fore to the extent that they can actually come to the fore in the near future, particularly with the internet proliferation of the internet, net technologies, etc. You will find that networking will become rampant all over the world. I do believe that this cycle of about 30 years, the phase of this 30 years, has diluted to a very great extent due to stamina. The world found solutions. For example, the FATF, right? The FATF proved to be a fairly effective instrument platform. It put the pressure of many things on players, on sponsors. But we saw what happened to Pakistan itself. They were worried, although they tried to squirm, they tried to go around it, but they really didn't find solutions to it so easily. And therefore, I think to a great extent, those networks have been neutralized at the moment. These will come up. This kind of a thing comes up with geopolitics. You see, the last cycle happened at the end of the Cold War and the New World Order, which came up after 1989. That New World Order was different. That world order was different. There was a greater confrontation with the Western civilization against the Islamic civilization, right? That's what Samuel P. Huntington was writing about and analyzing. Many people didn't believe him that this was a civilizational conflict, or what was it exactly. Now we are in the next phase. We are in another phase of the development of the world order. You are now finding China, Russia, the northern axis, so to say, Iran, China, Russia, Turkey, maybe other countries in Southeast Asia, all coming to the fore there. Now, this will have its own dynamics, which are at the moment unpredictable. You can't really predict it. But somewhere there will remain a core center from where this activity will continue, ideologies will continue to develop. The Middle East is one such core center, which to some extent has been diluted, but the AFPAC region, Afghanistan, Pakistan, is the core center of this. It's a large landmass. It's got everything which is needed to nurture terror. If you really see it, political instability, radical ideologies, feudalistic kind of makeup of society, ungovernable areas, poor economy, and this adrenaline of extremist radical thinking. All this put together is a very lethal dose. This is what keeps things going. Now, if you really look at it, Middle East, much of it has improved. But this region, no, it has not. The American withdrawal was hurried, quick. It left behind turmoil. It did not resolve anything as such. And I think all that had happened was a temporary, uh, should I say, halt. It's not a stabilization, a temporary halt to activity. It's a tactical break, should I say. Nothing more than that. And this activity is simmering today. And with the number of incidents happening in Pakistan, if you really count them over a period of time, you realize it's almost back to what it was 10 years ago. 2014, when Zarb-e-Azb was launched, and the Tariq-e-Taliban Pakistan, the Islamic State Khorasan, all of them are extremely active, extremely active. The only reason why the world is not taking so much attention of things here is because of what's happening in Ukraine, right? And what's happening on the larger front of the Sino-Russian relations, etc. Otherwise, really saying if these are big acts taking place, they would all be noticeable at the moment. That's the prime reason I say it again. That's the prime reason you and I are actually refocusing on this area.
I must say that's a very scary scenario, if I may just say it in a very lighter vein, sir. You mentioned AFPAC, sir, and you've told us what is I would say the basic requirements of having a terrorist-based or a terrorist thought process propagating in the area. There are two things that I want to ask you, sir. One, why is it that this area, there are more areas in the world around like this? Of course, Africa has got many such areas where this thing. Why is the focus in AFPAC itself? The Middle East or the West Asian region, Syria's is still unbalanced, and that place is got resources, oil, money, a lot of black market and this and that. Why this region is the first one? And second one, sir, you mentioned the attacks in Pakistan. These attacks have been small scale and targeted security based attacks. What does that tell you?
Good. Let me answer both questions. The first part as to why the focus in this area, why is this the core center? Firstly, if you go to Africa, Al-Shabaab, and organizations such as that, you go to Kenya, you go to Nigeria, you go to Mali, these areas are still, well, Nigeria does have its resources, no doubt. But it's too far geopolitically and too unimportant geopolitically for it to make a difference. Terrorists always look for big ticket things, something which is going to give them a huge media exposure, a larger than life image. That's what they look for. Now, if you look at it, Southeast Asia, you remember there was a campaign in Indonesia. It happened in Bali, the Bali bombings, if you remember, and things. Other than Indonesia, even today, Philippines has still got insurgencies, acts of terror still going on, etc. But if you look at it from an Islamic civilizational angle, and if you look at this from an Islamic radicalism angle, then that's too far placed from the area of where it makes a difference. Where does it make a difference? Middle East, right? It's too far away. If you're declaring a caliphate, for example, which is what is the aim of the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan also, to declare a caliphate in the area that it has captured and expanded. Someone stands up in Southeast Asia and says, this is my area and this is the caliphate. People will laugh him off. You're too far emotionally, sentimentally from the core center of Islam. Same with Nigeria, right? To an extent, same with Central Asia. The ISIS did it primarily in the areas of Iraq, Syria, very close to Saudi Arabia, and they felt sentimentally that they could carry the day with them. They couldn't. They didn't succeed in doing it. The next best area close by, having Islamic population, vulnerable populations, as I told you, ungovernable spaces, areas in Afghanistan which are today not under the control of the Taliban, poor, poverty-stricken populations, poor governance. Of course, the Pakistan army is a strong army, but notwithstanding that, it's not a very modern army. And Pakistan is not a very modern state to be able to address this with modern means. Ultimately, all these states address terrorism in the kinetic way, no other way. And we'll discuss this subsequently. Even day before yesterday, the meeting which has taken place in Islamabad, they've looked at ways of how to address this whole issue, right? Of course, they are promising that this time they are not going to look at it kinetically. They're going to look at it from a larger angle. I don't know how much is this going to be possible, because within Pakistan, to conduct a campaign, a psychological campaign against the radical Islam, etc., is going to be very, very difficult. They will ultimately end up only using the kinetic route, and that only creates more problems. So that is the prime reason why this area is the core center. And then if you look north, south, east, west, north is Central Asia, east is India, 200 million Muslims. Beyond that, Indonesia, 220 million Muslims. Then you have Middle East in the west, and you have the areas of the shrines in Saudi Arabia. So I think geopolitically, geostrategically, this is the area where the terrorists get an emotional dividend and effectiveness simultaneously.
If I may add a small little thing, availability of targets.
Yes, of course. Lots and lots of targets.
Yeah. I mean, my humble addition to what you were saying, because availability of very sensitive targets, if I may add.
Absolutely. But let me tell you, once terrorists develop that capability, they think big. And they will not restrict it to Pakistan or Pakistan's ungovernable spaces, or even look at India to that great extent. They will look at it far beyond.
Region.
So, see, remember 9/11? After 9/11, lots of cities around the world analyzed and felt that they could be the next targets. Dubai, for example, Singapore, Hong Kong, many of them felt that they were potential targets. So if terrorists tend to think big, and that is what is usually what brings them to grief ultimately. After all, if you see, 9/11 has brought this entire thing to grief. It was the Americans who went into Afghanistan, not that they have succeeded in a huge way, but whatever Osama bin Laden or Al-Qaeda was attempting to achieve in terms of effectiveness around the world got curbed, very largely got neutralized because of this overreach that they did.
Why do you say that TTP, sir? I mean, you've got the ISIS, you've got the black flags of ISIS are around the place, and as a matter of fact, these lone wolf attacks that actually take place around the world, including India, not a very great significance. Any attack is bad, let me just put that across, but not a very great geopolitical significance has a black flag of ISIS. Are you hinting that TTP, ISIS is somewhere together? Point number one question. And two, are you hinting that TTP has the resources, has the standing, and has the reach within the people to actually become a global phenomenon?
Very good question. Firstly, I don't think, or at least my research does not reveal to me, that there is any intrinsic linkage between the Taliban Pakistan and the Islamic State Khorasan so far. And I repeat that, so far. I do expect that this cooperation is going to come in the near future. At the moment, the Islamic State, not the IS Khorasan, but IS otherwise, is attempting to remain above water. Otherwise, it will get obliterated. It is attempting to remain above water and carrying out small acts wherever it can to maintain its relevance. This is a thing which terrorist organizations have to resort to if they don't want to get obliterated completely. The Al Qaeda, this is exactly how the Al Qaeda has survived all these years, in the great hope that there will be a 9/11 again. It's 22 years since then. They've not been able to repeat something like that. Okay. So, of course, also, of course, the world is much more aware of things, and securities around the world have improved to a great extent. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is a relevant organization today because, first of all, let me go into the brief history for our viewers. In 2007, you only had India-focused terror groups primarily in Pakistan. There were some other groups. There were, anti-Shia groups like the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi and things like that. But they were not India focused. But the India focused groups were Lashkar-e-Toiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, Al-Badr, and all kinds of organizations such as the 2007, when the attack took place on the Lal Masjid under the orders of Pervez Musharraf. Pervez Musharraf had been targeted twice by the Jaish-e-Mohammed, if you remember, and that was one of the major reasons why he perceived that perhaps this policy which Zia had adopted of using extremist radical Islam as a weapon, the weaponization of Islam, was proving counterproductive. So he went after these organizations which had tried to take over the Lal Masjid. You know what happened subsequently, and as soon as this operation was over, subsequently the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan came into being with the intent of actually defeating the Pakistan army, taking over the Pakistan government, creating a Sharia law in all areas which they would have captured, right? And that's the way, the manner of the creation of an Islamic state virtually within Pakistan. So their target was not India. They have not participated in any action in Kashmir or anything like that. Theirs was internal, and primarily started with the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa area, which then it was from 2014. Operation Zarb-e-Azb went in 2015. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan hit back very badly by targeting the army public school. 138 children were killed in that. Zarb-e-Azb was launched after the attack on the Karachi airport, where the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, 2014, right? And this thing carried on till 2018. A very large number of Pakistani army formations were actually deployed for this. And by 18, they had the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan may not have been defeated, but have been neutralized to a great extent, and they had been thrown back into Afghanistan. And that's where they remained, right? And it was difficult for the Afghan Taliban to support them at that time because they were seeking the assistance of Pakistan themselves. So the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan got sandwiched between the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistan state and Pakistan army. After 31st of August 2021, when the Americans withdrew, that thing changed. Well, Afghanistan was now under the rule of the Taliban, and the Taliban was showing eyes to the state of Pakistan. It was no longer under Pakistan as such. It was not looking for facilitation from Pakistan under any circumstances. So it started supporting the Taliban, the Pakistan Taliban, openly. And now you find bases, therefore, inside in the Afghan Taliban territory. The TTP has got its own areas, ungoverned areas as such, and that is why its effectiveness has enhanced. Besides, of course, the fact that a huge amount of weaponry is available, modern weaponry is available, which you correctly identified in the beginning, and made available to them, and they're making use of that to target whatever their targets they have. They started off with if you remember, an agreement actually. They had an agreement with Pakistan initially in 2021, which lasted a couple of weeks, but in December 2021, that agreement broke down. And thereafter, a series of incidents have taken place, starting with particularly in March, that attack on the Peshawar mosque, where I think almost 80 people were killed. It was a police mosque where 80 people were killed. And that was the initiation. Then it happened in Karachi and started creeping closer to Punjab, the Pakistan Punjab. Attention, it seems to me that very appropriately from a Pakistan, from a TTP angle, they've chosen not to go big. They are carrying out small attacks all over. And these small attacks, you take them in period of a month, 2 months, it builds up to a hell of a lot. They've recently killed an ISI brigadier along with the 3 other ranks.
2 ISI chaps.
These are the kinds of things which, and slowly this will get ratcheted up. And when you look at the cumulative effect of it, it's big. And particularly if it is going to come to the what I call the center of gravity, the state of Punjab, then in Pakistan is going to find it very difficult. So I am a little surprised at the moment that Pakistan, with its experience of Zarbiyat and another operation called Radul Fazad, which were simultaneous operations, despite this experience of kinetic operations, this time Pakistan doesn't seem to be going after these organizations. They say we will use the normal, engagement route and things like that, convincing them, and the soft power route. But the last point which I want to make is, when terrorist activity surfaces and reaches a particular level, you can't get into soft power engagements with terrorists. It has to be the kinetic route up to a point where you make it evident to the terrorist organizations that they cannot win. When that happens, you start your engagements with soft power. This is the mistake Pakistan is making this time.
Prolific words, if I may, sir. But on a sideline, is there seriousness within Pakistan for this? Because there have been multiple examples, and I'm sorry, but wherein the ISI, okay, let me just speak the Pakistani language for a minute, and if the audience does not hit me with stones for that, they say that and rogue actors within the organization are responsible for these kind of things. And this is a narrative that the Pakistanis did spread across when they were questioned in the open world. Now, if they are talking about this, my point is, are there any rogue actors that would support the TTP in its actions? A lot of people blame Imran Khan and they say, he's got some hidden connections with them as well. Is there seriousness within the state itself to do this, or is just another way of getting some more money?
It's very difficult to find evidence to link political parties to terrorism. We've had this issue in India.
Yeah.
Wherever there has been terrorism, there have been political elements perhaps attached to them, but we've never been able to prove it, establish those linkages. The same case exists in Pakistan. Lots and lots of allegations are being made against Imran Khan's party, etc. But I don't think this will stand anywhere in a court of law. So to say that there are I'm quite sure that there have to be linkages, right? There have to be networks. You see, these are very, very dubious networks which exist in situations such as this. And there are political elements, there are underworld elements, there are political criminal elements who promote this kind of activity. Can hardly miss out the fact that you have someone like Dawood Ibrahim, for example, right? D Company, which has been existent in Karachi, and you've had these linkages which have taken place, all those attacks that have happened in Mumbai and things like that. So I suppose most of us can assume this, but we really can't stand any kind of a analysis or questioning on this. But if Pakistan wants to neutralize and defeat this, it has to get back to once again to personalities, political elements uh, in Afghanistan. It has to convince the Taliban that they have to withdraw support to it. Because if you have transnational support for a cause such as this, then there is no end to it. We've seen this in Kashmir. We have taken so long, almost 30 years we have taken to curb this. Today, effectively, the security forces of India have curbed it, right, to a very large extent. And also, this has been facilitated by the fact that Pakistan today is on the back foot, economically, politically, and things like that. Otherwise, perhaps situation in Kashmir would have recycled again, right? But at the moment, with the kind of situation and the kind of relationship that Pakistan is enjoying strangely with the Taliban, it doesn't seem that they will have any means available with them to be able to curb this comfortably. And that's maybe one of the reasons they don't want to go after the Taliban Pakistan kinetically, because this may just upset the Afghan Taliban to a great extent. And you know what is Pakistan's interest in Afghanistan? The strategic depth. They don't want India's presence there. They feel that any action that they take which is going to put the Afghan Taliban off is only going to be to India's advantage. Because in their perception, they must be imagining that India is only proactively looking at getting back to Kandahar and Kabul and places like that to re-establish our consulates and re-establish our linkages there, etc., and get into the backyard of Pakistan and upset the whole thing through a maneuver. This is what must be worrying them hugely. And I can foresee one of the reasons perhaps why they may not be doing this kinetically is not to upset the Afghan Taliban, and probably they will get into negotiation with them. So far, the Pakistan government has made efforts, and the recent meetings of the NSA, their National Security Council, does seem to reveal that they want to take everyone on board politically as far as possible to try and meet this scourge of terror.
I don't know if you purposefully left this out for me to ask you another question, but society is a big thing. And that is the thread, I would say, the common thread between India and Pakistan. Very few common things between both the countries, but that is a common thread. As you mentioned in one of your answers, ideology, right? So it can spread through. So how does the society in both these countries actually enable or disable this kind of a effort by these groups? And also, is there a possibility that the dormant, if I may, right now, I mean, these groups, killing these groups completely is difficult, but the dormant India focused groups would see a power center within the TTP and say, yaar, chalo, koi to bada hai, usko pakad lete hain, uska, let's take some help from him. Is there a possibility of that happening?
Interesting. The second question is more interesting. But the first part is also needs us to focus on it. Civil society always makes a difference. Pakistan's civil society seems to be in a gray zone. I mean, majority of the elements, I'm sure, are looking for peace, internal security, stabilization, a better quality of life, economy improving. I mean, everything that you
Basics.
look for in terms of leading a happier life is what
Basic.
Pakistan civil society is also hoping for. But at the same time, when you go back in time and look at some of the awkward things which have been supported by Pakistan civil society, like the blasphemy laws, for example, right, or the virtual deification of Mumtaz Qadir, elements of that kind, people like that, the man who assassinated Salman Taseer, the governor of Punjab.
Punjab.
It then sends you very awkward messages home that this is a society otherwise perfectly normal. I mean, across from India to Pakistan, you should not be able to differentiate between the society, but this society seems to be at odds with itself and is willing to go to limits absolutely. I mean, the limits absolutely to promote these very very radical ideas that Islam seems to have some elements within Islam seem to have thrown up. Uh, Tolerance levels are very, very low. But at the same time, when you speak to educated people and maybe some other people also, what are some of the people I love to talk to are the taxi drivers of Dubai. Not all of them are educated. Many of them come from these areas in Swat and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and things like that. And they tell you very clearly, they look at India and they extol the virtues of India. And today, of late, in the last couple of months, we are seeing on social media lots and lots of mention about India, mention of the Indian Prime Minister, mention of the welfare state virtually that India has become or is becoming. So I think it is making a difference within Pakistan also. But still, as it happens, the silent majority is still that. Those who want this peace but cannot speak up. And
May
there
I?
are elements
I'm
who
sorry.
will continue doing this, who will continue driving this radical ideology, which took birth, well, it took birth many years ago, it took birth right after partition, but was brought into focus by General Ziaul Haq in 1977 as a virtual weaponization. I'm not seeing anything being done to reduce that.
I
That aspect.
sorry.
But let me come back to your second question. Let me again come
Uh,
back to your second
yeah,
question because
yeah,
that was
yeah.
very important, I think. Very, very briefly, the Islamic State Khorasan so far doesn't seem to have shown any kind of a movement towards conniving with jointly conducting operations with the TTP. And the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the two main India-focused groups, have been very loyal to the ISI. They have been sponsored by the ISI. They were set up, I think, virtually set up by the ISI. They have been nurtured. They have been paid. Their infrastructure is tolerated. After all, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan does not have infrastructure of Murid-ke or Bahawalpur camp, the manner in which the Lashkar-e-Taiba or the Jaish-e-Mohammed has got. Right? All this is tolerated by by ISI. So I'm not sure whether Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed are looking for any kind of a cooperation with the TTP. These two groups are primarily are India focused and they're more Punjab based, essentially Punjab based, although they get their recruitment from Karachi and other areas too. At some stage, this could change if their ambition enhances. For example, the Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed are both found today in Afghanistan in the vacant spaces there, some of the ungovernable spaces there. What are they doing there? Well, obviously, they're doing service for Pakistan. They're doing service for ISI to establish Pakistani influence, the ISI influence in those areas. They are the best frontline soldiers of Pakistan without sending the Pakistan army there. So, as a payback, at payback time, they are going to demand from the ISI the freedom to go into Kashmir once again. And ISI will be, of course, in a state of denial, but will not be able to probably hold them back. And that's where the danger comes. That's where the danger comes for India. That once the Pakistani state, the Pakistan army, the intelligence services, etc., are beholden to the India-focused groups in this manner, then they really can't hold them back.
I'm sorry, I was trying to interject you on one small thing because
Yeah.
I keep noticing these little videos that keep coming out of Pakistan and the social media impact of Pakistan, where they're probably looking at a whole lot of Indian development and this and that. But sir, the formidable problem that I see in the Pakistani society, and please do critique me on this. I'd really request your thoughts on this. Is that I found that society to be a bit two-faced. When it comes down to India and Pakistan, they won't. I mean, we in India today are like, yeah, just hands off. Let them be. Let them do what they want to. We analyze them. We look at them. We probably laugh at them, and that's just about it. But that's not the case in Pakistan. There is a feeling of badla. There is a feeling of, and that's a very strong thing within Pakistan. That's where I see a problem within the Pakistani society because that feeling of badla and in the the Islamization of this whole area. You and I did a talk where it has been taught to the guy, Hindu kharab hai, Hindustan ye hai, Hindustan wo hai, and this is a very crass level of this thing. How does a society not support an anti-India game when it comes down to it? Right now they're down, so they're going to be na saab de do kuch. Minute they get their money, they'll be back.
See, let's analyze this from a slightly different angle. When the United States and Vietnam were fighting for the better part of 15 years, at the end of the war, the Vietnamese and the American public didn't hate each other, right? There were really no winners and no losers as such, although a lot of people say that the American forces were defeated. Well, they withdrew. They withdrew from there, but they were not really defeated as such. But at the end of the day, both the societies agreed to not hate each other. Lots and lots of people from Vietnam came to the United States. A lot of students came for education. The US spent a lot of money on developing Vietnam, and the two countries are the best of friends today. In the case of India-Pakistan, the defeat of 71 affected the psyche, not only of the Pakistan armed forces, but that of the Pakistan public. And this I can guarantee you, because I have met so many Pakistanis who have told me this. When a lot of Pakistani friends and their families have met me, and they have come to know that I am a Indian Muslim, and that too from the Indian army. They said, "Aap to hamare dushman ho." What makes me your enemy? What makes me your enemy? I am an Indian Muslim and I'm from the Indian army. I'm not your enemy as such. But right from the beginning, they classify you as enemy. So, yes, psych mein baitha hua hai. And who has not allowed this to be forgotten? The Pakistan army. They've been in control. Good psychological warfare. Putting out all these things into society. Discussing this at the lower levels. Everywhere. India is your enemy. We really didn't do this to Pakistan in our thinking. Maybe till as late as 99. After 99, after Kargil, we start. In fact, for the first time, if you remember, we started calling these people terrorists in 1999. Till then, we were calling them insurgents and militants.
Militants.
Me too. I still remember I was in Kashmir at that time, and when the orders came that you will address all these characters as terrorists, because they are terrorists. They've been carrying out terrorist acts, right? But our thinking started changing after 99. Then there was a brief phase of, engagement, peace, etc. till 2008, and thereafter it has been hammer and tongs after 2611. 2611, you see, these are milestones. These are all milestones. Kashmiri Pandit, the eviction of the Kashmiri Pandits, 1990. Kargil, 2611. Attack on Parliament in the middle, 2001. These are all milestone landmarks which have only added to our thinking of Pakistan as a militant adversarial state, an enemy state. Otherwise, I don't think by and large the Indian public really looked at Pakistan in that manner. We always consider them a weaker, smaller, weaker state, etc., particularly after 1971. Pakistan, on the other hand, now a virtual second-rate power, third-rate power, is feeling the effect of that. The psyche is all getting affected. Look at the foreign exchange reserves, $3 billion versus $570 billion. See the world stature. You see your prime minister being feted internationally. You see your chairperson of the G20. One of the major things which I've been talking of and telling a lot of people is what India has to learn today is how to handle its own success. One of the most important aspects of governance is handling national success. Suddenly India's confidence, high confidence. You should be seen as a nation which is confident and yet balanced. balanced completely. We are not looking at expansion of power or territories or land or something. We are looking at what the government of India today has laid out in terms of its aims: $5 trillion economy by 2030, $10 trillion economy by 2035. These are the aims to be put out and told to the world, told to Pakistan. Pakistan has never spoken about its economy. Its people never speak about its economy. And we have been only speaking of our economy since 1991, ever since we decided to take it upon ourselves to get into this game. Right? So I think the psychological mismatch between Indian society and Pakistan society has got to them very deeply. But as time goes by, and I predict that the gap between India and Pakistan is only going to become bigger. You will find Pakistan society will probably come to terms with India. And these signals that you're seeing at the moment of social media praising India, India's development, its prime minister, and things like that, its governance, etc., are all initial signals of that.
Let's hope so, sir. That's all I can say. But having said that, last question, and guys, start shooting up your questions so that we can engage the general on a little more with regards to this thing, because this is a dangerous thing, and which is where my next question comes to. Is this going to be, you said 30-year, 100-year, is this that 100-year war that India will need to fight? Because if this thing explodes within the region, then as a growing power slash superpower slash however you want to look at it, it's your problem. The world will say handle it.
See, Adi, one of the things I keep warning people today: don't declare premature victories. Because there is no such thing as a victory in this. There is no premature victory. Because these situations have a nasty way of recycling, which is why I'm using the term cycle of global terror. They have a nasty way of recycling and coming back. Be prepared. You were hit the last time. This time you should not be hit. You should be well prepared for it. There is no doubt that if there is a confrontation, a civilizational confrontation taking place, then there will be elements within Islam, there will be elements within the capitalist system or Western society or whatever, who will be in confrontation with each other. And therefore, you will find acts of terror, etc., taking place. And that is what will keep everyone, unfortunately, in a state of turmoil. The things will be in a state of turmoil, our minds will be in turbulence, and we will remain unsafe if this carries on in this manner. Education, better quality of life, better governance, improved economies, these are all utopian things. We wish them to be there. We wish them for India too. That we will only progress from where we are doing well, let's even progress further. But there's no guarantee that all other nations who can become the victims of this are going to follow it. So we've got see, this is a typical human tendency. These cycles keep coming back from time to time. Geopolitics is going to affect all this. The New World Order is going to affect all this. What the balance between the big powers is going to be in the future as a part of the New World Order is going to affect all this. I remember I just conducted a presentation the other day at the College of Military Engineering on the four conflict zones of the world. I identified Ukraine, which is European theater. I identified the Middle East. I identified South Asia, in which I included Afghanistan, Pakistan, and I included portions of Central Asia. And I looked at the Indo-Pacific. But at the end of these four, I included a slide on global terror. I said that's the fifth domain. These are four individual geostrategically displaced locations, areas where there will be turmoil. The turmoil will continue for some time. But here is the specter of global terror, which is all pervading around the world. And this is something we can't lose focus from.
I mean, the forever war, if I may. I was actually
Exactly.
looking for that phrase. It looks like that. How do you fight an ideology, sir? I mean, if you go back in history, the Americans tried it with the denazification. Uh, we see it in front of us today. Apparently, it didn't work uh, within their own countries, by the way. How do you fight this ideology? It's amazing because, as you mentioned in the second question, that it will creep through, and
You're
with an
right,
ever
absolutely.
connected,
It will
globalized
creep through.
world, yeah,
It will creep through because remember, the communist ideology has been virtually defeated. It's an artificial ideology created, defeated within 100 years almost. Although there are pockets here and there. The Naxalites still want to achieve it by 2046, making India a communist state, etc. There are different things. Here is a faith. Here is a faith being hijacked. Attempt to try and restore it to its roots. A churning within, which is looking at reformation in the faith and a return to the roots. This is an internal turmoil. This happens. It happens in faiths many times. It will continue happening for a fairly long time, but it will resolve itself only within the faith. To say that it can be defeated ideologically by another faith or it can be defeated kinetically would be the worst assumption.
the only thing I would say is it has to be broken down, and I think potential reach of a whole lot in terms of getting people to talk about the right things in
Absolutely.
multiple
Absolutely.
forums. It
Yes.
has to go down to the, as they say, grassroots level, and it
Absolutely.
can't be a regional specific, because if they don't like what's happening in that region, they'll just get up and go somewhere else where
And technology has come to the assistance of mankind. You've
the
got the
ISIS,
new
yeah,
whole thing of networks today. You've got social media, which is going 5G and 6G speeds will take over shortly. The world will be networked. People can talk from one end to the other end of the world free of cost at any time of the day, any time of the night. There can be multiple seminars taking place. There can be bandwidths which are huge, which can take all this. So I think engagements and communication will become the main weapons of fighting this.
exactly. Thank you, sir, for this. Let's get into some questions. Guys, before I do, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Very critical. Let's spread the word. These kind of discussions need to be had for us to understand where we stand in the region. Uh, all our dreams in terms of growth there's a big speed bump, which is global terror, and it's right in our backyard. So that's something that we need to understand. Ishan, thank you so much for your contribution. He says, what I find absolutely hilarious is that after the Pakistanis celebrated USA's exit from Afghanistan, it is the Taliban themselves who welcomed Indian infrastructure, developmental projects, and now TTP is a sworn enemy of Pakistan, which is a major humiliation of Pakistan and USA. I guess he's talking about the foresight and the vision of.
But let me make a correction here. This statement is fine. It doesn't need a response. There is no major humiliation for the USA here. The USA supported Indian infrastructure projects in Afghanistan, right? The Taliban today is also supporting it and accepting the Indian projects there. So I think it's a win-win. And the Americans are looking for stabilization of this area, not the creation of turbulence in that area, right? Pakistan is the one which is also looking for stabilization, but they have fallen foul with the Taliban. And because of that, they are facing all kinds of problems, such as the handling of the Durand line itself, the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, and suddenly losing control over their strategic depth.
Sometimes you really wonder why did they leave so many weapons there? Was it to upset the entire region or what? I'm not sure.
This was, I think, unthought through. There was an attempt during Trump's time. I think President Trump really didn't look at an exit taking place any time. they were looking for, and they had too much faith in the Afghan National Army. In fact, this faith was something I was myself stricken, frankly saying. I
Me
met
too.
lots and lots of people from the Pakistan, Afghan National Army. Here, I visited Afghanistan, met people there. We were led to believe that this is a very, very effective organization. I mean, we can only discern what we are told and in visits what we see a little bit. But levels of demotivation were very, very high. The Taliban was all over it. And none of us really assessed at that time that this is going to fall apart so quickly. We thought this was going to last for years, that the American presence, core presence of 2,000, 3,000 troops and with huge ANA out there and the Air Force and Afghan National Air Force itself are very, very effective. None of that was true. None of that was true. And I think the Americans fell for their own, they fell victim to their own psychological warfare.
Narrative. That's what they say. You lie 100 times at the 101st, you start believing what you said was the right
Say
thing.
yourself. Absolutely.
So, but there's one thing that interests me in this entire game, and I'm just gonna ask you this question because it's quite a nagging thing actually. Uh, the Americans, whatever they did, at the end of it, it's in their game, their national interest, and this and that. Afghanistan, as per se, that region has this. I don't know if it's a saying or it's a tradition. If you can't fight your enemy, just fall back and go into the dust, and then do it whenever you can later on. Isn't that what the Afghan army did? They just said, "Sorry, you're not doing this. Out."
I think the Afghan army, I would come and say today, now, after this experience that we have seen, it just lacked the motivation. And I think it was looking at reality. It said it had no confidence in its generalship, it had no confidence in its leadership. They were fighting as long as the Americans were there. They had an air force.
Yeah.
They had the support of UAVs and things like that, drones. I think pragmatically they realize that once all this is gone, they are cannon fodder.
You're losing
So it's
lives.
better if you can't beat them, join them. That's the policy they probably follow.
Absolutely, sir. Ishan, once again, thank you so much. Jai Hind, sir. Now that Russia has stopped ISIS in Syria and peace is being discussed between Iran and Saudi Arabia, the Saudis and the Houthis, will the terror outfits that were created by the West during the Cold War shift their focus towards Pakistan?
First of all, I'm not sure whether your assumption is correct that these terror outfits were created by the West during the Cold War shift. There isn't too much evidence to say that. But I will answer your first part of your question, which is very, very focused and very correct. You are seeing stabilization in Yemen taking place, which was a core center of a terror activity. Al Qaeda was also located there. Areas of turbulence is where most of these terrorist groups go. The Al Qaeda was there itself. Proxies that Iran may have been using against Saudi Arabia, now they are also perhaps withdrawn to an extent, although I'm not still fully of the belief that a stabilization has taken place in the Middle East. I need more evidence to really declare that in my mind that the stabilization in the Middle East has really taken place. But let's presume that a greater stabilization has taken place here. So that really leaves only the Palestinian issue live, the Syrian civil war to an extent live, the Iraq civil war between the Shia Sunni issue internally in Iraq, that is still alive. And it is not influenced very greatly by Saudi Arabia and Iran. It is very, very much independent to Iraq itself. So I really don't know whether there is going to be a shift of all this activity from there into Afghanistan and Pakistan as such. You must remember that there is no central authority in Islam which is trying to fight this war of the civilizational war, so to say. It's sporadic fights all over which are taking place. There is no ecclesiastical head within Islam who, unlike Christianity, where you have ecclesiastical head, there is no such head in within Islam. So you can't say that someone is trying to bring this whole thing together. The Saudis don't have that kind of control. What is happening is that Afghanistan, being a turbulent zone, and now with the American absence from there, should I say, their presence having been removed, has created opportunities there for these groups to gravitate. It's been being done for the last 3 years. Those are areas where they can go, nurture themselves, await opportunities, right? No one is going to go after them in a hurry. The Americans are not going to come back to to Afghanistan in the next 20 years. So they feel that this is the area where they can be safe still. And then they have options, move towards Central Asia. 5 states are there. We have rich states, Turkmenistan with all its gas reserves, etc. Money is a very, very important factor in this. Drug traffic. Usually this is the center of the Golden Crescent. Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Turkey. This is the routes through which lots of smuggling takes place. The drug cartels are all there. Which is why it makes this a very lucrative area. And it's for this reason that you will find many of these rump groups who are now getting eliminated because of the so-called peace finding between these nations. You will find them that they would have not given up the cause, but they will probably move into these areas of Afghanistan, northern Afghanistan, and Central Asia. Yeah.
I must say another thanks to Ishan, because the one comment that you made actually made a lot of sense to me. There's no central authority that is actually fighting a war of civilizations, and that's profound,
Absolutely.
if I may, because we don't consider that as part of any analysis when we talk about it. It's
Absolutely. I've
always
spoken of this many times. I've spoken
yeah,
of this in my talks many times to explain to people that these are disparate networks which are fighting
silos. Yeah,
without, you're absolutely right, silos. And these are not really in a combined effort. The Al Qaeda and the ISIS don't see eye to eye at all. Right? Most of these groups don't see eye to eye at all.
that's why I love these talks, because they always bring about a different aspect of things. When you read an article or something like that is written, although I love doing that as well,
Yeah.
when you're talking to someone about it, there's always a different angle that comes across, and it brings
Absolutely.
about
Absolutely.
something different, which is interesting. Thank you, Naveen, for your contribution. General sir, historically, we saw US's geopolitics led to anti-US sentiment and gave rise to terrorism against the US. As China grows and plays its own geopolitics, will this lead to another kind of terrorism? How would China handle it?
Very interesting. I must compliment Naveen for this well thought out, well framed question. Yes, the US Ugly American. Read a book called The Ugly American. Came out in the
Yeah,
60s, right?
60s.
They hated American, right? Typical capitalist, Western capitalist society, going around the world, wearing the sun hat, a nice summer suit, and all over Southeast Asia, and portions of North Africa, etc. The Americans got hated. And that's why a lot of terrorist activity took place against the Americans. The Chinese have so far, in their endeavors, remained ideologically well away from all this, right? Um, if you saw, along with the United States, when the Americans go in somewhere, they go in with a lot of soft power also and things like that, trying to change your minds. And the Chinese haven't attempted all that to such an extent. They will. They will. As they get stronger, as the economy becomes bigger, and their ambitions soar even higher, they will do this. And then you will find, if they are successful in actually delivering to societies around the world, for example, if by their intervention in Middle East, if there is greater stability between Iran and Saudi Arabia in the future, China will draw a lot of gratitude from people. Then nothing may happen. But more often than not, what happens is your own interests start becoming, taking the upper platform. The Chinese will uh, no longer, perhaps after some time, start being looked upon as marauders within the Middle East, primarily looking for business, looking for energy, and nothing else. And the give back is very little, right? The give back to society. The Chinese are not good at giving back.
Big problem.
If you see the Belt and Road Initiative (BRI), in 10 years the BRI is collapsing virtually because their message or their intention was, or what they were conveying was that this is an commercial outreach, economic outreach, development outreach, etc. While in actual effect it is a strategic outreach, right? And they really are not caring for the welfare and the well-being of those people. Look at the way that the Chinese are being treated in Pakistan. I think that will give you the best example. How they have been targeted, how the workers have been targeted, how their senior officials have been targeted in Pakistan. They're moved on with huge security. Pakistan raised a light, I think most people are not aware. Pakistan raised a light division of 16,000 troops to protect the Chinese assets. Right? So the Chinese are no great friends. And what you are saying is very, very true. Uh, they have to learn this game. They have to learn how to be a big power. It's not easy to become a big power. It's not easy to be this policeman of the world. They have to learn how to do it. The Americans have learned it the hard way, and now today they are much, much better at it. But the Chinese will probably go through those phases of learning and will have to suffer it out.
Trials and tribulations. If I
Yes.
may also add a small little thing, sir. Uh, a lot of the times I am quite prone to believe that the Chinese are in Pakistan to ensure that these kind of stuff is kept away from them. Their own this thing. They built up a base in Tajikistan on the mouth of the Wakan. They are they don't allow traffic and a lot of things coming from Pakistan into China.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
very
that's
little.
true.
They don't
That's
allow
true.
it. So this
That's true.
so-called CPEC, China Pakistan friendship that pass and all that in the Gujarat area and all that, there's no trucks going from here. It's only trucks coming from there. And now
The
that is
scope
also
is
stopped.
very limited. The scope of the CPC is not just a trade route, of course. It is a conglomeration of many facilities, power projects, irrigation projects, all kinds of things which have gone into it. But the actual trade part of it, what does Pakistan manufacture that it can provide to China? That, oh yeah, you can say that even cotton today is failing Pakistan. Otherwise, cotton was such a thing which Pakistan had in
Beautiful,
abundance with them.
yeah,
But it's
fantastic
failing.
quality also.
Fantastic quality. Most of us know our wives love to look at Pakistani clothes and fabric
Bed
and things
sheets,
like that.
linen, and
Yes,
beautiful stuff.
it's
Yeah,
very
yes,
high
I know, I
quality
know.
stuff.
Mm.
But none of it is going back to China. It's not appreciated too much in China, perhaps. This route is a strategic route, more a strategic route, primarily to have an alternative access to the North in West Indian Ocean,
So,
the area of the Arabian Sea, which is a very crucial area. This area connecting, uh, Gwadar, Chabahar to Djibouti. It's triangle. Very, very important area because this is the area through which major waterways which exist of the world. It's like the Russians fighting for the Black Sea, right? For the Chinese. This is a very crucial area. Another very crucial area is the Straits of Malacca. And you will see that the Straits of Malacca will emerge in the next 10 years as a bone of contention, right?
absolutely.
It will become a major bone of contention.
So
This is exactly what is happening here.
I'm going to request 10 more minutes from you
Yeah,
for
yeah.
some
Okay, please.
interesting questions. We are
Okay.
and Sundays people like to watch, and it's
I hope we have got a good clientele of people watching.
oh
Yeah.
yes, absolutely, sir. Uh, a question on terrorism. Naveen, thank you so much for this contribution. How do you see the growing refugee crisis, growing crime rates, and increasing weaponization in Europe? Will this lead to terrorist bases there?
Very interesting. I'm glad you're asking these questions. This is very close to my heart, this subject in particular. You see, traveling in Europe, I went into France, Paris, landed at the Paris railway station, Gare du Nord. I was surprised to see the demography of that station. I mean, there were no locals, there were only immigrants. And as you travel into Europe, I went into Belgium at the Brussels Square. There were nothing but Turks everywhere. And aggressive at that, very, very aggressive. There were restaurants which were all Mediterranean. So obviously, demographics has affected Europe very seriously. Dwindling populations, um, aging populations, all this has led to the coming in of people from other parts of the world. Those coming in from places like India, etc., are benign. May not be very well educated. Many of people who illegally come are benign people who are coming genuinely for a job. There are others, North Africa, etc., can be quite aggressive. Not to say that North Africans are in any way, there's nothing negative about people from North Africa. They are wonderful people. But it's just that uh, many people from North Africa have gone into Europe. The first generation of them worked on all kinds of jobs, made a life for themselves. Their children grew and studied and have now come into a higher echelons of society. For them, it is not acceptable to get jobs which their parents did. Now, this is creating a societal turbulence within Europe. And add to it is the current surge of boat people virtually from North Africa who are entering into Italy and Greece and places like that. So there's no doubt about it. It is going to cause anguish in Europe in the future. At the moment, they are accepting within limits. They are accepting human rights. They are looking at and things like that. But there will have to be a limit to it at some stage, and that is where what I feel afraid of. And I think the Ukraine war, if it dwindles down into a war of proxies, then it's got all the potential for that kind of thing traveling into Central
Spreading.
and Western Europe. That will be anguish for the European society completely.
And with the spread of weapons, it's quite possible.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
This is an
And
interesting
after all, Europe is well developed, communications are there, travel is easy. Terrorist activity is also promoted by all this. In areas where you have very little travel facilities, you don't have. Actually, there are very little scope for earning money and things like that. This kind of activity will be a low key. You can't find terrorist activity taking place in Ladakh. Difficult because wild area, far away somewhere, a cold desert, high altitude area. You get terrorists from somewhere to come and stay there. They'll not be able to survive even living off the land. Europe is a country which can throw up all this problem. There is a continent which can throw up all this together, and that's why I worry for Europe.
This is an interesting googly, sir, if I may say that before I read it out to you. What is a comparative assessment of a military might of TTP versus BLA versus the Pashtuns? Who is in a position to inflict maximum damage to Pakistani army and governing their claimed geography?
Interesting question. Interesting question. All three have got their own cause. As you say, in most of these things, you have their cause. The TTP has got a very radical cause, of course.
Yeah.
Establishment of the caliphate and the establishment of Sharia law all over Pakistan and things like that, right? Release of, I don't know how many, 150 prisoners, which Pakistan has not released. All that is part of that. The BLA has used terrorist means also, and therefore cannot be classified purely as a militant or insurgent organization. The acts of violence have been far lesser comparatively, and their sense of organization seems to be good, but not sufficiently effective yet. Right? They are all in different parts of Pakistan, but of course in Balochistan itself, it's a 14 million population, I think approximately 4 or 14% of the Pakistan population is Baluch. 40% of the territory and 14% is Baluch, which makes it about 32 million people, which is a sizable number. So the support is there and they are concentrated in Baluchistan mostly. But I still think the BLA, its capability to contest the Pakistan army is comparatively limited. The Pashtuns have the will, have the capability, have the linkages with Afghanistan, have got the terrain, all suiting them. But they haven't shown their hand so far. It's not to that extent so far. Right? I mean, the TTP also has got so many Pashtuns within them. But the Pashtuns as an organization themselves, as an entity, as a separatist entity looking for merger with Afghanistan or separation in any way, so far haven't shown a propensity to be very, very strong. I would still put the TTP, and it took the Pakistan Army 4 years of concentrated, focused operations. And they've carried out some very, very drastic terrorist acts. The Army Public School, the Peshawar attack, the Peshawar Air Force Base attack, the Karachi attack, the attack on various naval ships of the Pakistan Navy, etc. Lots and lots of things have been done by them. So, to my mind, it is the TTP which can inflict the maximum damage on the Pakistan security forces as such.
Shritik asks, the Pakistani establishment recently announced that they would launch an all-out operation against terrorism. I won't say terrorism, but the TTP, as per se. How do you see this panning out, and what retort will TTP BLA resort to after this? You hinted pushing back into Afghanistan's strategic depth.
Yes, I was reading about this. Day before yesterday itself, there was a major meeting of the National Security Council, which was addressed by the Army Chief. The Army Chief also addressed the National Assembly, the lower house in the National Assembly, and briefed them about what the Pakistan Army intends to do. And they actually showed that in forms of doctrine, they are not going to use the kinetic route this time. I don't think they really mean this. They are mentioning this. Lots of things are spoken. You see, lots and lots of things are spoken. Perhaps threat of human rights organizations, things like that. They want to show themselves in benign light. They want to show themselves to the World Bank and the IMF and other international organizations that they are the victims of terror and that they are fighting back in a very, very benign kind of a way, engaging people, the non-military, soft power route, etc. This is all projection. I don't think the Pakistan Army is going to do that. There are enough hotheads in the Pakistan Army to make sure that they put the pressure of the world on their army chief, right? And sooner than later, you're going to find Pakistan, 11 Corps, Peshawar, 12 Corps, Quetta, getting deeply involved in this, right? Because if they don't get effective on this, if they don't get effective on proactive, reasonably offensive operations, I don't think it is going to be easy. You see, you can't go by this premise that terrorism can be resolved through the soft power route, as I was mentioning earlier, can be resolved with the soft power route. It can be resolved with the soft power route provided you have brought the level of violence to a level, certain platform. From there, I tried the same thing myself in Kashmir, where I said, oh, today the violence has come down to so and so. Let's now get into the balance. 80% hard power, 20% soft power. Now let's try and reduce it to 50-50. Here the Pakistanis are trying to say that they're going to use hard 100% soft power. Who are they fooling? Fooling themselves, no one else.
That's Imran Khan's golden goose, sir.
Yeah.
And the last question I'd like to ask you, I'm sorry about that, but that's how the Pakistanis put it. Should the government plan a game plan for possible spillover effect of Pakistani crisis on India, like refugees and other disturbances? Is India-Pakistan border fencing capable of handling it? This is a is a big doubt amongst people. So because every time we discuss the possible breakup of Pakistan or the future of Pakistan, where you talk about the factor that Pakistan might just be in a position that would not be able to hold its population up. Question comes up: are we ready to face that onslaught? Because I
This
also
is, I
personally,
consider this as almost the worst case contingency. This is
so
going,
where else will they
if
go,
this
sir?
ever happens, if this
Where else
ever
will they go?
happens, if this ever happens, we are really going to have a problem on our hands. And border fencing, etc., don't, these fencings don't hold back populations, yeah,
Yeah, that's
right?
the whole thing.
These are uprooted in minutes, things like this. And you can't have Indian troops in defensive positions firing small arms on unarmed people. No, no, it's very, very difficult doing this kind of a thing. Contingency planning for this, I don't think anyone is doing it at the moment. I'm quite confident Pakistan will survive. It will survive. But yes, the worst case scenario is this. And if this happens, it's not just a mix of population displacement coming in here. There's a whole issue of nuclear weapons. There's an issue of millions of weapons that are there in Pakistan, of drugs and other trafficking and all kinds of things. I mean, the western borders of India will go berserk with issues. All that we are seeking in terms of our stabilization will go for a six completely. This is not something we should ever hope for. This is something we should always just pray it never happens. And that is where I always say that those who advocate a Pakistan imploded don't consider these issues. Pakistan weak, Pakistan stable is very much in our interest.
Inward
I
looking.
repeat that. It's very much in our interest. Weak but stable. Not a completely emaciated Pakistan, imploded, exploded, whatever you want to say, non existent state. Sorry, that's not to our interest in any way.
Sir, I'm going to break my what I said, and it's a punny question, not a funny question. It's a punny question that
Yeah, yeah.
Bharat asked. Sir, is Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. What is Pakistan?
Very interesting one. If Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires, what is Pakistan? It is the
I mean,
empire of graveyards. I would say it is the empire of potential graveyards. I mean, it is a quagmire, Pakistan.
that's a good one, I must say.
Lots and lots of nations around the world would be looking at Pakistan. They may not talk about it sufficiently. They want to keep it in good humor and think, but they worry for Pakistan. They really worry for Pakistan. I think, as I said, it is the state which creates an empire over graveyards.
That's a good one, sir. I mean, I was about to give up and say, dude, I this is bounced over me, but that's a good one. I must say this, sir. This has been a fantastic talk because we are talking about. Of course, this is all hypothetics right now, but this
Yeah,
hypothetics connected with realities, which we need to consider going forward. We can't be arrogant enough to say that yeah, India is so powerful, nothing can touch us. It's not going to happen. These guys will come and touch us because at the end of it, if we are going to get successful, somebody's going to be jealous. And when that somebody is jealous, all sorts of funny things happen. And that's
exactly.
how the ball bounces. And that's something that we need to understand and
Which is one
comprehend
of
and
the
take forward.
reasons why they always advocate that when a nation is on the march, when it's doing well, it must take its neighbors along.
Yeah. But
And
you
which is
take a
what India is attempting to do with
attempting.
Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, etc. But I think perhaps much more needs to be done. And as we go
Absolutely.
along, we'll probably need to do much more.
That absolutely, sir. And the question always everybody will ask is how do you consider Pakistan as a neighbor when I mean, the whole story is known about Pakistan, so need I say more? But sir, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure and a learning experience. TTP is highly underrated after this talk. That's something that I would come out and say in a simple way. There is a threat that we need to consider. There is a threat where all this could build up into something which is against us. There's no question about that. So thank you for making us realize that. And of course, the Pakistan challenge will always remain in front of us. to discuss furthermore, sir, and
Thank
another
you.
subject next time. Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All the very best to our audience. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, guys. Before I sign off, like, very critical, and subscribe. Jai Hind.